is our panel on careers in academic administration. I thought we'd have a lot of time for Q&A from you guys, but have the panelists start with an introduction about what they do in their offices, what their backgrounds are, and how their career path has evolved. So let them start.
Hi, I'm Hsieh, and I'm in Reunion Giving in the Office of Development. And I actually started here at HGS with my Yale experience. I was a grad student here at NELC, and I finished my MPhil and then did a few years writing my dissertation, and then decided I'm going to look elsewhere. And so I was looking at all the various types of opportunities out there, and development I should say it's fundraising, but it's officially called development, appealed to me. So that's where I sort of focused and got an in, and now I'm in my third year.
Hi, I'm Shirley Chock. I work in the Central Finance Division at Yale. I've been here, it'll be 15 years in March, so I've been here for a long time. And I've been around, it's all Central Finance for the whole 15 years, but different departments. So I started out in financial reporting, and that group produces the audited financial statements for the university. And then I moved over to financial planning and analysis, which is they're known as the budget office, but they also do the long-range financial plan, the capital plan, and the operating budget. And my role there was in training and development, and I was running the recruiting program that they had that would hire undergrads into the office as entry-level financial analysts. And then now I'm actually in a different role that just started yesterday, because you guys have heard that we're implementing a new financial system. Workday is going to replace Oracle. We're already on Workday for the HR and payroll and benefits, but we're moving our financial system over to Workday, and I lead the financial management team, and that is now my full-time job, so we can implement Workday and the new budget tool. So that's my current role, and I have a very meandering career path that got me here. So we can talk a little about that later, but I didn't start in this kind of role when I graduated college and wound up here.
Hi everyone, I'm Rebekah Westphal. I am currently the Director of the Fellowships Office in the Center for International and Professional Experience. I've been at Yale for now 12 years. I actually have an undergraduate degree in music and literature and a graduate degree in musicology. And you're like, how did that happen? I guess this is what this is about, isn't it? And for a while I performed across the country, and I also taught music for a long time. But I had done some work when I was an undergraduate in college admissions. And when I moved to New Haven, I was looking for all sorts of different jobs, and actually wound up in the admissions office at Yale, undergraduate admissions, and I worked there for 11 years, eventually ending up as the Director of International Admissions. So I've only just recently moved into my new position as Director of Fellowships. Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Dara Norwood, and I am starting my 6th year here at Yale, and I work in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions, and I came from a background in a children's nonprofit in New York City, where I was working. I did some development work. I was officially an executive assistant, but I did a lot of other things, including development, and sort of worked my way through along and whatever story into admissions. So I've been here for 5 years now, going on 6, where I've had various roles in the office. I just got a new role, I was telling Rebekah, as the Director of Alumni Interviewing, so my world has just got crazy in the last 48 hours. But yeah.
Great. I think what might be helpful is to describe what does it mean, what does the day look like? What does it mean to be in development admissions? How do you spend your time? Because I think something like development may not be clear to somebody who doesn't do it.
Yeah, development is one of the largest parts of the university, together with the AYA, that's outward facing. So we deal with alumni. The AYA deals with alumni in the reunions and affinity groups, but we interact with alumni in terms of their fundraising and their donating to the school. So for reunion giving, I look after 2 classes that are in their reunion cycle. So Yale College classes have reunions every 5 years. You start on your 5th and then you end on your 65th. And then when you're done with your 65th, you can come to any reunion you like because you're at that level now. So I believe this past reunion we had someone who was close to 100 in age that came back to campus, which was very nice. So I currently work with the class of 57. They're approaching their 60th reunion, and it's the tradition of Yale for when a class is coming to their reunion, they also present the university with a gift. And this is pretty much all the donations that this class has made for 5 years. So it could be in anywhere within the university, it could be unrestricted, it could be an endowed fund for scholarships, it could be into athletics or music, or anywhere within the campus where they feel a connection. And so I work with volunteers and donors in that class to achieve their reunion gift goal hopefully by the time they come back to campus at the end of May, beginning of June.
Hi. So finance at Yale is actually a very large, complex entity. I work for Central Finance, which is located at 25 Science Park, but finance is actually happening out in the business units as well. So the schools and the departments all have their finance departments, and there is some confusion about what happens in our office versus what's happening out in the schools and the departments. So the schools and the departments, they are called business operations. So they're the frontline people managing the operations out there, and they're the ones budgeting, putting together budgets to what it takes to run their operations. And they have to make sure that people's expense reports are submitted and paid, and checks are deposited, and things that need to be accounted for are counted the right way. So that happens all out in the units, and there's a dotted reporting line into business operations, which is part of central finance. So the people who are the business managers, the lead administrators, the operations managers out in the units, they have 2 bosses. They have a boss that reports into their deans and directors, and then a reporting line up into central business operations. In central finance, what we do in financial planning and analysis is we first need to do a very high-level strategic financial plan, and that is with the input of the major units out. And so medical school, of course, the self-support schools, athletics, central library, who generates the most revenues and has the most expenses, they will let us know what do they think the changes are that's going to happen in the next year. And then we produce a high-level strategic financial plan that's presented to the Yale Corporation. And from there, we set the target for the next year's operating budget. And that also sets the capital budget, because we need to have a budget before we can build the buildings, and before, and actually it's in our bylaws that we cannot spend a penny unless we have an approved operating budget by the Yale Corporation. And at Yale, the provost is actually the person who is in charge of the operating budget. So even though finance is not part of the provost office, we are a separate unit that reports into the new VP for Operations, Jack Callahan. Steve Murphy, who is the Vice President for Finance, actually has a dual report into the provost for the budget. And then Then we have the accounting functions and the payroll, all these things that actually spend the money. We have different people who handle that. And then at the end of the day, we have to report it all. And we need to produce audited financial statements that has the outside auditors come in to make sure that we're producing financial statements in accordance with GAAP accounting rules. So then we have these separate reporting for management and internal reporting and separate external reporting for the bondholders, because we issue debt and we're required to have audited financial statements for the bondholders. So it's a very, very large and complex organization. There's also like a cross-section between accounting and finance and IT, because the business solutions aspect of finance, supporting our accounting systems, supporting our budgeting systems, that actually resides within finance, not within IT. So there's a little bit of everything that is under finance.
So I'll talk about fellowships, because Dara, you can talk about fellowships. So in the fellowships, but essentially we're in the Center for International and Professional Experience. We're one of 4 units. So we have Yale Summer Session, we have Study Abroad, we have the Office of Career Strategy, and we also have Yale Fellowships. So my team, we're a team of 8. And what we do is we manage all of the competitions for Yale-funded and Yale-administered fellowships. And what that means is, so for example, if you're applying for a Rhodes, you would work through our office, writing your proposal, going through the campus nomination process, this kind of thing. So a lot of my work is working with faculty to put together committees, thinking about how to manage all the application processes for these various fellowships. I do a huge amount of advising with students, and that's the piece that I absolutely love the most, is working one-on-one with students in developing ideas for their fellowship proposals and so forth and so on. We do some advising about, graduate schools, because of course a lot of these fellowships are for graduate schools, and then also just helping students figure out, how do these things work within their own sort of career paths, because we have a lot of fellowships for freshmen even, undergraduates here at Yale. Obviously, I'm also managing a team, so we also handle the Light Fellowship, which is a huge fellowship for East Asian language study. And so a lot of moving pieces and juggling lots of deadlines, but essentially that's what our office does.
So there are a lot of moving pieces in undergraduate admissions as well, but I guess the big picture of it is that our office is pretty cyclical in what we do. So we talk about seasons a lot in our office. Right now we're in the middle of reading season. We have just over 32,000 applications this year. So our time from November through March is basically us sitting down and reading all of these applications. A lot of times I read from home and our staff reads from home, so our office is often a ghost town at this moment. But a lot of other things are also going on. So everybody has other projects that they are working on. I mentioned working with alumni to complete our interviewing process, where we have tens of thousands of interviews that are being conducted all over the world right now. So managing that process, and anything from as small as I manage the calendar of which officers are on duty every day, to I also currently, and hopefully still, run our on-campus interviewing program. So at the very core of it, I'm reading a lot of applications a day, but for everyone else in the office, there are just tons of different smaller projects that go into this world of admissions that, a lot of times I get the question of, do you guys do anything over the summer? And I think you would be surprised the amount of small projects and conferences and issues that go into the world of admissions that we're constantly dealing with and getting to work with. And, you know, every once in a while getting to see and work with our admitted students is also pretty awesome because we love you all. So if you haven't met an admissions officer or yours, always say hi to them.
Great. Questions? Anyone? I'll start with another one then. What drew you to university admissions? Or if you fell into it, how did that happen? Or not admissions, administration, I'm sorry.
So I guess I can answer that. I was working in New York City, like I said. I was working for the Fresh Air Fund, which is a children's nonprofit, and as part of my job, one of our programs was a mentoring program, and I was working with this young student who was first-generation student, family from Colombia, and he was 13 years old when we started working together, and halfway through the process, he was like, okay, well, it's time for me to start getting ready for college. His parents had no idea even how to begin this process, so I spent a couple years working with him to get ready for the SAT and to think about where he should even go, and and just going through this whole process with him. I was really fascinated with it, and at some point I was like, I wonder what it's like from the other area, because maybe that'll shine some light on how to help students like him. And so I thought, maybe I'll go into admissions for a couple of years and then go back to the other side, to the college counseling side. And so I worked my way into admissions, and I have not left yet. So I got very comfortable very quickly. So, yeah, that's how I went up here.
Yeah, you do get comfortable quickly, because I stayed there for 11 years. But I think, I had done, because when you're in college, you sort of have, you can have lots of different experiences, because there's so many different offices here at the university and all sorts of different needs and, so many jobs for students. But that's how I first was introduced to admissions. I was a tour guide. I went to a very small visual and performing arts school, and so we got involved with even reading applications and interviewing students, so we were like fully sort of all hands on deck. And then obviously I moved away from that for a while, but this particular position at Yale was for international admissions, and I'm not from the US, but I obviously I live here now, but I've traveled a lot, and I thought this was a good fit for me, and I also just wanted to be part of an institution of higher education, because I'd finished my graduate degree. I understood the value of being in a place like that, and I loved that kind of environment. So I wanted to continue that, even though I wasn't necessarily studying. And it's worked out, really well. I mean, once you're not a student and you get to the other side of being at a university, it looks quite different. And you understand it in a very, very different way, but very equally rewarding, I would say.
Yeah, I think for me, I guess now is the time for my career path story, where it just highlights you really can't plan out your life. I graduated from the University of Chicago with an econ degree, and back, this was a long, long time ago, back in 1996, there really were only kind of two major paths if you have an econ degree from University of Chicago. You went into investment banking or you went into consulting, and that's really what everybody did. And so, of course, you need to have your internship, your summer internship. Your junior year has to be an important one so that you get hired into, Goldman's or Morgan Stanley or one of those big investment banks. So I did my summer internship at Goldman Sachs in Hong Kong, and I spent my summer there, and that experience taught me that I did not want to be in investment banking at all. That culture was just insane. I got to know this very young, he was in his 40s, he had just got promoted to head up the whole East Asia region, and he was this nice guy. He ate well. He ate salads like every day for lunch. I never saw him eat unhealthy. We had a gym in the office. He worked out every day. Really nice guy. But, if you're an investment banker, you're just living and breathing in the office. You're never home. You're working insane hours. My internship ended, and I had gone over to visit my grandparents in Taiwan for a long weekend, and then I came back into the office just kind of to say goodbye to everybody, and I found out that that weekend when I was in Taiwan, he had passed away from a stress-related heart attack in his 40s. And that was kind of the eye-opener for me to think about, is this really what I want to do with my life, and for what? So, that was a life-changing experience for me. And so I really didn't know what did I want to do, because I also knew I didn't want to go into consulting. That just wasn't for me. So like, what do I do? And luckily, there was this recruiting program that the City of New York Parks and Recreation was doing, where they were recruiting graduates from the top schools to work for $18,000 a year for the city parks department in various different areas. So you kind of got to pick which part of the parks department did you want to be in. So I chose between their budget office and their revenue department. And between the two, the revenue department was just a way cooler job. I got to be a project manager for I was actually project manager for Yankee Stadium. So I met with the Yankees operations folks, the Department of Transportation, the parking people, because there are all these businesses that were either licensing or leasing parks property for their businesses. So as project managers, we got to drive city vehicles. I got to have like a light, a car that had the light on. I got to park anywhere I wanted. Got to drive into these areas I didn't even know belonged to New York City. So I was in Staten Island and City Island and the Bronx. So I had stables and golf courses, and Orchard Beach was my project. So that was a lot of fun. And that was really because they had this program where we had a community of, these. I was from University of Chicago, which was really outside of their recruiting area, but my friend from Harvard told me about it, so that's why I applied. But they weren't actually recruiting University of Chicago grads, but because I lived in New York, and my friend at Harvard told me about it, but I was working with Harvard grads and Yale grads, and we had this little community. It wasn't supposed to really be a long-term job. A lot of people would stay and then go on to law school. And yes, I did that. It was a good experience, but the red tape in a city government, it kind of wears on you after a while. So then I went to work for an auction house, Sotheby's, because my parents have a jewelry business, and I really wanted to work there. I had actually applied there before I did the Parks Department program. I had applied to Sotheby's because they had a business managers training program there, and I submitted my application after their recruiting period had already ended, and then I sent the person that I interviewed with a letter to say that, I was wondering if there were any positions at Sotheby's or if I could meet with her. So she brought me in, and actually there was a position there. So I became a business manager a business manager trainee at Sotheby's, and that's actually where I learned accounting. And because University of Chicago is like Yale, we didn't have any accounting or finance classes, so it was just on the job. I learned how to do accounting, I learned how to do planning and budgeting and finance, and that was a really great experience. From there, I got tapped to join a startup, because now we're in 1999, 2000, and that's when all the startups came up. So I got to be controller of a media startup, and then got totally burnt out doing that. And my now husband actually just got a job in Connecticut. So I decided to move here, and I thought that like Yale was actually the place that I wanted to be. I interviewed I worked with a recruiter, and I interviewed at a financial services company, and Sikorsky, and Yale, and this was by far, like hands down, the place I wanted to be because I'm kind of a geek at heart. I was not cool enough for the startup. I was not like fancy and posh enough for Sotheby's, but this is the place for me.
So I think I heard a lot of people did their undergrad and then were sort of looking at job options. I knew exactly what I wanted to do at the end of my undergrad, which was Egyptology. So I went into grad school for Egyptology, and then I did my schooling in New Zealand, and then I got into the PhD program here for Egyptology. Then I came here and I enjoyed myself a lot, and I spent my summers in Egypt digging up random things and sand and all sorts of fun adventures, and then I realized there was really not a lot of job opportunities in Egyptology. It's difficult enough to find an academic career in the humanities, and then I had to choose the one thing in the humanities that had even fewer options. Right? So I was looking around, and I was the recipient of financial aid here, and I'm sure you guys all know all the exciting resources and opportunities available at Yale, and a lot of that comes from very generous donors. And so I was looking at what I could do that still had that aspect of the humanities in it, and I looked at museums. I worked at the Peabody for a bit, and I was looking at all the different parts of how a museum functions. And the two parts that drew me the most were the education and the fundraising/development. And so, how many of you are grad students? All right. So I had prepared my whole life to go into academia. I knew how to write a CV. I knew how to present myself as an academic. And then all of a sudden they're asking for this thing called a resume. And they're focusing on completely different skills, right? So I had no idea what I was doing, and so I looked up the director of development for the Peabody, and I emailed her, and I said, I'd like to meet and talk to you about your job and how to get into that profession. And we went for lunch, and she said, there's this opening that's in, my neighbor's department. I'm going to pass along your resume. So that was the beginning. That was an in. And I think my advice to graduate students who are thinking of transitioning into a completely different career path is to make those connections with people and talk to them, because the fields are very different. So for certain areas, they may take you on as someone who is very highly educated but don't have experience in that area. And in other fields, they may prefer someone with experience in that area and less education. So for those areas, you might want to think about looking at a more entry-level job that gets you that experience before you move on to the next step. And I'm lucky in that development, they focus on the experience rather than the education, but there are a lot of supporting roles within development that hire people very highly educated, and within those roles you get to learn about development as a job. In fact, Yale has sort of a captive audience. We have a lot of very highly educated trailing spouses that are looking for opportunities at Yale. So our support staff are all very highly educated people who are here for a few years and get that experience and then move on elsewhere.
Yeah, I would second that. Don't discount the low-paying jobs to gain that experience, because if you have a hole in your resume, you have to find that experience somehow, and it could be through a volunteer organization. So that's a gap that we see in finance positions a lot, because there really aren't that many training programs out there who, will take you in and teach you everything that you need to know. Most people want people to be able to do their job, from day one, hit the ground running, and you have to show the hiring manager that you can do that job. So how is it that you can show them that? So if there's a requirement in that skill set that you don't have, you have to find a way to build that up. And that can either be, taking a low-paying job just to get that on your resume, or work with a volunteer organization to help with bookkeeping for a local small nonprofit organization, be their treasurer, to develop that in some way, and to really think about how you can talk about the transferable skills. And I think that it's true for the people who are in science, who want to go out of science and into finance, or even people who are in IT and want to go into finance, that they're still using their technical lingo in their resume. And in finance, we want to see people who are not just using all of that technical lingo, and then we have to go in and translate to see, but what can you do in this particular job? So you have to be able to recraft what you've done and explain it in a way that makes sense for the person who's trying to hire you for that job.
Questions? I guess as a follow-up, question that I had was, if you were to identify what are the key skills that you value in your job, or that you find are valued in your departments, what would those be?
So, let's see. I would say development is very important. Interpersonal skills, that you're able to talk to people and build that connection and be the intermediary between the person and the university, because we really want that relationship to go on for the rest of the alum's life, that they feel included and still part of Yale. I would say that a strong writing component for grad students. I know that we are all trained in writing and we can express ourselves very well. When a hiring manager is looking at your CV, your resume, sometimes that doesn't translate, as you said. So it's very important for you to show them that you're capable of doing this completely different line of work. We're very detail-oriented. We need to be able to work in partnership with a lot of areas of the university. So we work very closely with the president's office. The higher level Yale administrators all travel to meet with donors, and they are supported by the development staff. A lot of the large gifts that have come in, obviously all of them are through the office. And so it's maintaining that type of relationship. And depending on the level of donors, you might be talking about their focus on Yale, where they want to support the university. Are they looking at a big thing like the Schwarzman Center, or are they looking at a slightly smaller thing like one person's fellowship? And we work with donors on all of that.
In finance, so I have recruited, it's been undergrads, not grads, into our office in our recruiting program, but we actually we've looked at all majors. So it's not just all econ majors that we've hired. Liberal arts is actually a great foundation for financial analysis. I think that what made me a good financial analyst was actually my liberal arts education, because you have to be able to look at things that may seem like they have no connection and find a connection in them. And you also have to think about what is the next thing. So you may not know what you're looking for, but you find something, and then you need to see where the connections are and what's that next thing that impacts. So if you're thinking about a role in financial analysis, then being able to flex in that way is really important. Accounting is a totally different skill set. In accounting, you need to want to be able to order things, to put things into the right buckets and understand where everything belongs, and understand maybe very complex accounting rules, and then take what you see and do that accounting based on the accounting rules. But I think what is consistent with everything is a genuine love for numbers and data. I don't think you can be a successful person in finance if you just don't like math and you don't like numbers and you don't like data. Then that's not really the field for you. But if you really do love it, then it's something that you can succeed in even if you don't have the typical background, because I was controller of a startup company. I was the manager for Yale's financial reporting and analysis department, which produces the audited financial statements. I don't have a CPA, and I was director of finance training and development in Yale's financial planning and analysis office, and I don't have a CFA. And so it is possible. You just have to work for it.
I would say in fellowships, and I've just had to hire a number of people actually. I think some of the things that I look for most are sort of the intangibles, like a seriously can-do attitude, and I want someone who's going to come in and be totally part of a team, and someone who, even if they disagree with how things are moving forward, will just jump in anyway. Those are very difficult things to pull off a resume. So we have these sort of several stages of interviewing, But also, of course, we work with tons of students. So again, interpersonal skills. And I think you'll hear this for a lot of these kinds of jobs. Interpersonal skills are so important. And how do you develop those? And partly it's just getting out there, talking to a lot of people, getting involved with things going on campus. I actually hire 2 graduate students in the office to help with the various pieces, and we'll be hiring someone in the fall to help with some of our writing. So also just sort of creative thinking about outreach to students, that's really, really important. And sort of staying on the pulse of the way in which students receive information. So being able to understand sort of what works and what doesn't, and because it seems it's changing all the time, of course. So those are the things I look for.
And I think I would echo all the same things that people are saying in our office. Public speaking skills, writing skills are important, but it's really this interpersonal aspect. We deal with a lot of constituents in our office, both externally and internally. So just having that baseline is really important, but I think one of the fun things about my office is that a lot of people also bring their own personal sort of expertises. So we have some people who are really good at technical, some of the technical things that we do. Whenever we get somebody who comes from a STEM background, we get really excited and throw them into that sort of thing. I come from more of a program management background, so budgeting, managing people, recruiting, that sort of thing is where my interest and expertise, if you want to call it that, lies. So, so just baseline some of these sort of things that people tell you won't ever get you a job after that I heard as an English major. What are you going to do with that? Actually, it's really helped me in my career because I learned how to be flexible, how to work with others, how to write, and how to speak, and how to analyze things, and that has really pushed me forward in a lot of ways.
I just want to add something also as well, that being professional in the way that you interact with people is also super important. And by that I mean the timeliness of response to phone calls and emails, the sort of little extra step that people take to make contact or follow up, and also being professional is about being organized and making sure that, when you say you're going to do something, that you actually do it and you follow through. These are small things, but actually they make a big difference. So if you're reaching out to people to go and ask for informational interviews, or, which is actually a great idea, just to have a sense of what someone's job is like, be really professional about that process as well. Not just about having the job, but the actual process of finding a job. And making connections and figuring stuff out. You sort of want to start off on the right foot immediately so that people get the right impression about who you are and what you can do.
I completely agree with that, and I would say that something that never crossed my mind before going into a non-academic career is that we know as grad students we're trained to write well, we're trained to present, we're trained to teach, but sometimes, depending on the field, the people doing the hiring may have a more old-fashioned idea of what academics are like, and they may not realize that you also have these transferable skill sets. So an informational interview, reaching out to someone and having that face-to-face conversation will let them know that you can talk to a human being and you're personable and you're likable and you're responsible and you can work in an office environment. So that will be very helpful if just to build those connections, because if you're only submitting resumes, you may not get very far, unfortunately. It's important to find other avenues as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of what they're saying, because very few of the jobs that I got were from your typical process where you submit you see a job posting online and then you write a cover letter and a resume blind. It's just cold. You submit it into the system. Somebody looks through that and then contacts you. Very few of my jobs actually happen in that way. The best jobs are the ones where people are contacting you because they had some kind of impression or somebody told them that they should contact you because they think you can do the job. So you already start off on a higher footing. And, that may not guarantee you the job. Of course, you still have to go through the whole, application process because you are interviewing and competing against other applicants. But a recommendation, and for me too, if somebody that I trust and value recommends somebody for me to interview, automatically, they have a higher weighting, there because I trust that person, and, so, that is from how you present yourself and the networking that you do.
So what are the exit opportunities like? Like all the positions that you're in fall under the academic administration umbrella, but they're different flavors, right? So is it like a lateral transition, or do you specialize in what you do and then you go up a different route, like maybe out of Yale? So could you just kind of talk about that?
Yeah, I think in development, the focus is on building relationships, which means it's applicable to a wide variety of fields. We actually just had a few people leave to go on to better positions, and one woman is the assistant VP at University of Richmond in Virginia. Someone else is now working for the Cancer Institute in New York. So there's a lot of opportunities because the focus is on building interpersonal relationships. And so it's very applicable. Within development, there are people who find their niche and they really enjoy that and they stay there for years. People who look after classes, they can look after their class for 10, 20 years, and they're happy to do that. So you can move laterally as well as vertically. Our office, our VP works very closely with President Salave, with top-level donors, so there are opportunities there as well. People go into work actually at the President's office, at the Provost's office, and other areas of administration.
Yeah, I think that at Yale, there is an opportunity for you to keep growing and learning your entire professional career just because we do so many different things. So if you want to be in finance and business operations, you are some people want to do one thing for their whole career. They like what they do and they want to do that. But most people want to grow and want to learn different things. And there's definitely an encouragement for you to move. Those lateral movements are so important for professional development because that will just increase your skill set. That will make you even more desirable for that promotional, because if you have a hole in your skill set and you plug that hole by making a lateral move where you can strengthen that, then when a promotional opportunity comes up, then you're in a better position. And just because we do so much, like I've been at Yale, it'll be 15 years in March, and I still don't know everything about Yale finances yet. I'm still learning, and that makes it very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I've seen a lot of people leave Yale and go on to other positions. I've seen a lot of people move around within Yale, and so that's been my experience just recently, as I was in one position and then moved into a completely different department. So I was completely repotted, which was fine. And you know what? I needed to be repotted. It was actually really great to have a bit of a change, but also get some new skills. So I think there's all sorts of ways you can do it, but there is a lot of room for movement just within Yale itself into completely different areas. It doesn't have to be related necessarily, but you're moving with a skill set which can transfer into lots of different arenas. So.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I've seen in the time that I've been in the admissions office a few different movement paths. There's a group of younger people who come in and it's often their first job, and a lot of those students go on to grad school. And that's usually what happens for the younger staff. And then I've seen a couple of people, like Reb, go into higher positions within Yale's university, and then there's also a group of people who are higher up in our office who have left and are now running departments in sort of related fields, because there's sort of an upper limit of the admissions world of where you can go within an office. So sometimes people take those transferable skills, and some stay in education. I think some people go into completely different fields, but there's a lot of different ways that you can go after working in this. And I think for people who our office is their first job is especially great, because it is a position where you are thrown in immediately and you are given a lot of autonomy and a lot of different projects to work on that make you very appealing to other people in whatever field people are going to afterwards.
Related to that, I was wondering, either for you personally or folks you know who maybe have left or stayed, what makes people stay and what makes people leave? Kind of what's great and what's not so great?
You mean about being at Yale, or?
Maybe Yale is a little broad, but in your department or your sort of level, whatever sort of comes to mind, actually, whatever's most helpful.
I think when you're looking for a job, a career, the actual physical responsibilities of the job is only one aspect of it. You're looking at the entire job environment, right? And the people you'll be working with and your day-to-day. And so when you're in the right place and your personality fits with those people, you tend to stay. And if they offer you growth opportunities and everything stays fresh and exciting. So for development, people tend to stay. It's a very large, so central development includes all the people who are frontline, so they interact with donors. And then there's a lot of support staff, and there's also the people who process the gifts that come in and make sure the data is correct. This, just for Central, not schools and units, is over 300 people. Right, so there's a lot of different places to go. If you don't like your particular little department, there's another one right beside you, and you know the people, so you know the culture. So I'd say when you're looking for something, the culture, the personality, the work environment is just as important as the actual work.
I mean, my office is pretty spectacular and, very unbiased. The culture, again, is very, very strong in my office. And I think coming from, the two main jobs that I've had since graduating from college, the morale of a place makes a lot of difference in whether you stay or go. So we have people in our office who have been there for 40 years and, counting. And so like I said earlier, I think one of the reasons why people leave is just because there is this sort of natural ceiling of where you can go in the admissions world. So for people who I think often get presented or headhunted for larger positions, I think that's a reason why they leave. And and for others it's this natural, I want to go to grad school sort of position, but everybody in this middle ground tends to just hang out for a while, and then all of a sudden it's been 15 years.
Yeah, the culture is really important, and that's something that, when you're doing your job seeking, remember it's a two-way interview. It's not just them interviewing you for the job, but it's you interviewing them if you actually want to work there. And you need to, make sure that you know what that culture is, because you're going to be spending more time with your coworkers than you're going to be spending with your family and friends. And you need to make sure that that's going to, be the right fit for you. So, do your research on, is there a lot of turnover? So if there's constant turnover, understand why.
So just adding one other thing, because I'm thinking about this. My sister right now is in the middle of looking for a new job, so I'm seeing it through her eyes, and she's in a completely different field. She's a web developer, but she wound up leaving the place that she was at for 5 years because it was a place that it was a very large company, but they didn't have specific goals for the department that she was in. So everybody in her department wound up leaving. A lot of them left without having jobs to go to, which is a very big red flag. And it was not, she was there for 5 years but didn't have the skills that she needed to get to a better position because she was in a place where they were not giving her things, and they were not giving her things when she asked for things. So I think that's important to try and find out when you are trying to find a job. So she is in this sort of gray area right now where she's interviewing and has to explain to people how she was at a company for 5 years but doesn't have a skill set that is commensurate with the amount of time she was there. And having to do that without bashing a place, because nobody likes that either. So it's really interesting. All of the things that we're talking about, networking is really what she is doing, but also when she is talking to people, she knows now to ask about the culture of the place and who's there and who's happy, and trying to find somebody at the company to ask these questions because she doesn't want to get caught in that same thing again.
And on that point, if you feel like there's a gap or you're transitioning, it's very important to have a storyline that flows and the reasons that you're moving into a different direction. So it's less trying to cover up or make excuses of a whole, but you were thinking of this other area and you did these things to explore it, and now you have this great opportunity, and you would be delighted if they will take you on. So the story arc is very important.
Great. Well, Brian is back, which means our time is up. But thank you so much for our panel. It was wonderful.